There's like 4 major ways that we have chronic stress in our lives where they come about. And maybe you can see 1 or 2 or 3 of these in your own life in the past that can set you up for that type of condition, or the people in your life, for example. Number 1, repeated hits, multiple frequent stressors with little or no time for relaxation or adjustment. It's kind of like those cartoons or movies you see someone's on the assembly line and the thing's coming down the assembly line, you got put together really quick, but the next one comes down the assembly line, the next one. So it keeps on going, doesn't stop. And there's not much time between them. It just keeps hitting you over and over again. Some examples of repeated hits.
Well, not having enough money to pay the bills equals kind of chronic stress. Huge one.
Well, it's true. Especially like someone's harassing you for the money too. Like every day you get like harassing phone calls or you realize you're up against it all the time. But something that's in the environment or in your life where it can happen in extreme circumstances, but again, you could have it just in an everyday situation. It's just relentless. It just doesn't let up. That's the repeated hits. Number 2, we get chronic stress when we don't have adaptation, when we can't adjust to a regularly occurring event in your life. Now, a lot of people have bad jobs. I mean, not bad jobs, but they have jobs that have stress in them. And if they're proactive, they maybe find a way to work around or adapt to that stressor. But if they feel like they have the inability to do that, or they don't see the option to do that, then it becomes chronic. So again, it's the lack of adapting. So as humans, we are very adaptable. We're very flexible. In fact, people even adapt to war over time. They live their lives in a war zone, sometimes at a lower stress level than people who aren't living in a war zone. Why? Because they've learned to make the adaptations that have to do to manage that chronic stress load. The third one, a prolonged response. The stress response gets turned on and it stays active even after the stressor is removed. This is quite common. You know, some people get really stressed out, that goes away, the stressor goes away, but they're still reacting like that stressor was still there. And they're actually intentionally under that stress response all the time. It's almost like a drug. It's almost like an addiction, where like they become addicted to that feeling of response to a stressor, and they just keep prolonging it when it's no longer actually in the environment or even valid to have that response to it long term. And also that's the nature of the mind too, not to let go of the identification with that in a way where it's reluctant to actually release that response. You become so acclimated to it, it's hard to be out of that environment with it. Like the argument's over, but you're still fighting it in your head all the time. You know, the boss called you out on something and you're still stressed out 2 days later because that circumstance happened, that inability to not let it become prolonged response. And then finally, we just don't do enough. It's inadequate. There's too little response too late. Like, oh, you know, I've just had this amazing crisis and maybe I'll do a minute of breath of fire, or maybe I'll do yoga tomorrow, or even an inadequate response too. Like maybe I'll just have another drink. So the lack of a proper response will tend to, of course, lead to accumulated chronic stress over time.
There's an interesting term, stacked crises.
Well, yeah, it is kind of like that domino effect too, especially if you don't have the reserve. Sometimes you push the one domino over and it just keeps going all through the entire day, your entire week, your entire life. You know, it's quite common actually that people do have multiple crises and think, well, what's the worst that could happen next? And there's something else happen. You can look at it astrologically, you look at it karmically, however you look at it, but sometimes, you know, crises don't come in ones, it comes in 2s and 3s sometimes. Some people actually thrive on that experience of everything being all messed up and screwed up, and life is just so bad. There's that identification with it, so why try to solve that problem? I've made it part of my life now. You know, it gets me pity or appreciation or whatever. This is, again, over time, because chronic is an indicator that somehow we have not dealt with it in the present moment. We've allowed it to continue for some reason over time into becoming chronic.
There is the physiological aspect. With immediate stressors, you have adrenaline, epinephrine, you have that immediate stress response from the adrenal glands. And then adrenals start to produce cortisol to help you deal more with the long-term stress. And it's that cortisol depletion and the response to the cortisol in the body is referred to in that inadequate response. If the cortisol response isn't strong enough, then your immune system is trying to compensate. And that, when you have the immune system becoming overactive, you have that cascade of inflammation, of allergies, of all kinds of those more serious health consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think what you mentioned, Karam, is interesting because the physiological aspects of chronic stress is quite real. It's very real. And sometimes we think stress is just psychological, it's in our mind, and that the reaction is. But approaching it from a physiological perspective, like say, what do I need to take care of the actual vehicle I'm in, so I can get out of the chronic stress response.
Your mind is your body.
Your mind and body. That's true. So I could change my diet. I could stop eating so much sugar, for example, or I could actually get out and walk for 15 minutes rather than just sitting watching TV. All these things that really would help us break that chronic stress response if we could take the proper physiological action for the body. It's also for the body and the mind too as well, body and mind.